Hey, CJ 4550, death penalty class. All right. So far, you've been exposed to information on the history of the death penalty, but in there, I alluded to some death penalty facts. The next unit, this for week 2, deals with key facts of the death penalty, and you'll see significant amount of readings from the Death Penalty Information Center in particular on your links. But you also have 3 PowerPoint slideshows. The first is about facts of the death penalty, and the second are about the federal death penalty and the military death penalty. Okay, and of course we're going to focus on North Carolina as well. But let's go through some of the basic facts first. The first slide you'll see in the first presentation is called States with and without the death penalty. Do you notice anything? The red states are states with the death penalty. What do you notice? It's largely a southern thing, right? This is one of the first key facts about the death penalty you need to understand. Yeah, there are other states that practice the death penalty, but it's predominantly a southern thing and also a Midwestern thing. The South is considered the Bible Belt. It's also considered the death penalty belt. Texas would be the buckle of that belt. It's the center of the death penalty, in particular certain counties there. You'll see that as we go through. Now, of the states that have it, you have the 30 states, or well, it's down to 28 now that have it. It happens so fast. So about half don't have it. Of the ones that have it, most of them don't regularly use it. In fact, so here's some quick math. The number of states that have averaged 1 execution since 1977, if you recall, this is the contemporary death penalty era from 1977 to the present era. The number of people that have averaged, or the number of states that have averaged 1 execution per year over this time period is 10 states. The number that have averaged 10 executions or more, 1. That's Texas. Okay. You click on the links. In fact, it's just a handful of counties that actually impose the death penalty. So even within a state like Texas, it's really just a handful of counties there that actually hand out the death sentence. Okay. Look up Harris County, Texas. That's sort of the center of the death penalty in the United States. You have 2,620 people on death row. This is in all states, federal government, and the U.S. military. The federal government has the death penalty, but almost never uses it. The military has the death penalty, hasn't used it since 1961. 3 people have been executed by the federal government this century. 143 people on death row in North Carolina. Remember, we haven't had an execution since August of 2006, right? Yeah. Sometimes you forget, it's been so long. Now, we're still ranked number 6 of all states in the size of our death row, but we have no idea when death sentences are going to be reinstated or death penalties are going to be carried out again. You'll notice that the death row inmate population grew dramatically, particularly in the 1980s and 1990s. This is when violent crime was really high, murder was really high. People were afraid of violent crime. Legislatures around the country got very tough on crime. More of them were started imposing the death penalty. So we have a huge increase. It started going down around 2000, the size of death row. Part of that's because people are being released from death row. Part of it is because people are dying on death row. And part of it is because we're just not sentencing as many people to death, as you'll see in North Carolina. Okay. You'll also see that the average increase, or the average amount of time spent on death row over time has increased. So now you're talking about an average of 20 years where people spend on death row before they're executed. Now, for the death penalty to deter murder, you'll see this later in the class. It has to be certain, it has to be likely to happen, which is not. It also has to be swift. After the crime, it has to occur quickly. 20 years is obviously not swift. So it's illogical to assume deterrence. Even if you want to believe it, you can, that the death penalty deters. It should, but it's so rare and it takes so long, it's hard to even imagine that it should be a deterrent anymore. All right, so look at how rare it is. You have 575,000 murders and non-negligent manslaughters. It's an average of 19,000 killings a year in the first 30 years since we started doing the death penalty again, 1977 to 2006. Only 7,000 death sentences, or 236 a year. 1,000 executions, or 35 a year. So what are the percentages? 1.2% of killings led to death sentence. That's not certain. 0.18% of killings led to an execution. That's not certain, right? So you can see why criminologists no longer believe the death penalty is a deterrent to murder. It's just too rare. Now, the reason it's rare, or the reasons it's rare, cannot be overcome, as you'll see when we go through the class. Later in the class, I'll explain this to you. It's just not likely to ever be more certain than it is today. Well, North Carolina sentenced 426 people to death during this time, 14 a year. Executed 43, it's 1.4 per year. But we have hundreds of murders every year, 500, 600, and one execution. So you see it's very, very, very rare. Yet, from 1977 to 1999, North Carolina ranked 10th in the country in terms of sentencing murders to death. The average in death penalty states was 2.2%. So 2.2% of murders in death penalty states got sentenced to death. Very, very, very rare, right? You'll see our death sentences in North Carolina from 1977 to 2019 went way up from 1981 to 1995, and then has declined significantly. During this period of 2003 to 2018, we have almost no death sentences. We had 8,699 murders and almost no death sentences. So it's freakishly rare here. Okay, you can look at where the executions come from on the PowerPoint slides. It starts on slide number 12 for the first presentation here about facts. North Carolina was tied for 9th in the number of executions since 1977, but we haven't had any since 2006. Texas is number 1, way out front. North Carolina is the 10th most likely state to sentence someone to death for a murder during this time. So we were an active death penalty state. In 2005, we were ranked number 2 and number 3. In 2005, 2006, we were ranked number 2 and number 3, respectively, in the number of executions. So we were competing for the gold medal, but of course, no one was ever going to catch Texas, right? The state of North Carolina, you'll see on the next slide, had the largest decline in death sentences between the 1990s and 2000s. I mentioned that in the first week. What happened to our murder rates? Dropped to the lowest level ever in recorded history, which goes back to the 1970s. So murder actually dropped as we stopped sentencing people to death, which is the opposite you'd expect if the death penalty were deterrent, right? If you look at the region, which is the last part of this presentation, most executions occur in the South, 82%. Okay, Texas alone, 38%. Only 4 people have been executed in the Northeast. Okay, so that's like 0%. So 82% in the South, 12% in the Midwest, 6% in the West, none in the Northeast. Okay, so death penalty is a Southern thing. I've written papers about this. If you're interested, there's a lot of reasons why that's true. But basically, we have more people, we have more murder, we are more punitive, we are tougher on crime, and we want to be tougher on crime for various reasons. Okay. The last slide shows you in the 1990s the number of murders versus the number of arrests versus the number of prosecutions versus the number of convictions. Death eligible. Only some murders are death eligible, remember. We'll talk about this in the law. Has to be an aggravated murder, has to be a murder that's qualified for the death penalty, and not all of them do. And then you see the number of death sentences and the number of executions. It's freakishly rare, so it's illogical to assume that it would be a deterrent. Okay? All right, we'll stop here. The next video will be very brief about the federal death penalty and the military death penalty. And then, of course, we'll spend a lot of time talking about North Carolina.